tears of peace. And thank you for yours. Tears of peace. This week, because of the title, Peace Begins With Me, I had some new awarenesses. I went inside myself and started looking at what is my life really? And what I recognized is that all the joy and happiness that I see as who I am and who I represent actually comes from a foundation of peace. And I never really noticed before because it's who I am. I'm aware that peace is our natural state. It just is. It's our natural state. And when anytime we're not at peace, you know, we're mistaken. Something's gone wrong. Our mind has slipped away into another arena. And so I asked, I asked, what's going on? What am I to learn from this? And I became aware that peace, and I started noticing my life and what I do 7 days a week, actually, which is interact with, actually, it's thousands of people if you count on the things I write, but certainly at least 100 people every week. And then what I started watching is there are miracles. And then I asked myself, is it peace that brings miracles? Is it peace that shows up and provides the foundation for what all of us say that we seek? Peace. Peace. Peace begins with you and me. But maybe peace is you and me. And then I looked at where I came from. And you could look at where you come from too. Because I started noticing that not many people seem to come from a place of peace. And so, why the difference? Where is that coming from? So I happened to be born in 1942, the middle of World War II, which, quite honestly, before I looked, see, Robert does Wikipedia, I can do it too, that World War II actually began in 1939, and it ended in 1945. So 1942, I was in the middle of what's considered to be the most catastrophic war that has ever been experienced on this planet. I didn't know that. And yet I was born in the middle of World War II. How could that be? I had a dad who went to the war. He actually was a conscientious objector. His main place to go as a kid, he was an introvert, the main place to go was the Christian Science reading room. And he read prolifically. So he was a New Thought person, my dad. I never really got that. I never really noticed that. And my dad told us, I was then, I think when he went, I was a little less than 1, something like that. A little less than 1.5 when he went to war. And he was in the infantry because they wouldn't let him off because he wasn't affiliated with a specific church, so he went. And we knew, my mother and I, we knew that he might not come back because he wasn't about to use his gun to shoot him. And what I remember him saying is it could have been another father of little kids just like he was a father. So he wasn't about to do that. He never talked about the war. In fact, he specifically said, I don't want to talk about it. But I grew up in a family that I realized was shaped not only by his Christian Science background, but a huge farm family that had no swearing, no arguing, no loud voices, people working together to make things work. I grew up in a home where there was only peace. And I never really noticed because it was what I knew. And so inside me, because that's where I grew up, there's been only peace. So when something happens or I experience something that feels unpeaceful to me, I immediately look at how can I harmonize this? What can I do? What can I do? So this is what World War II produced. And there were some other, I'm going to say, benefits in me and my family from that. But I'll bet that if you look at your history, the family you grew up in, the era in which you were born, says a lot about what your current focus is and about what has shaped your life. So I'm just going to suggest that you do that. So when I look at how this piece shows up in me, I begin to watch the few times that I remember when there was something that was controversial or unpeaceful. A grandma who thought, when she heard me talking with my college friends, who thought I was talking communist talk because I went to Antioch and we had to talk about all kinds of social ways of living. And she was actually going to silently, quietly leave our home. And my mother clued me in, and with fear, because I didn't have a lot of experience with confrontation or people being upset with me at all. I still don't have a lot of experience with that, believe it or not. And I went up, probably between 18 and 19. First time home from college. And I said to her, Grandma, I love you, and I'm sorry that I upset you. I'm sorry that what you believed was that somehow I wasn't the same as you, and I want you to know we were just talking with our friends, and I want you to stay. Now maybe for you that doesn't seem big, but even telling about it right now, that was big, because I dearly loved my grandma, and I never had anybody upset with me like that. I chose peace. And I chose to, in any way I could, to harmonize, to relinquish my position, and to find a way to apologize. When I see the world around me right now, present time, almost no one has a moment of peace. Almost every child grows up in a home where there is arguing, and loud noise, and loud music being played, and TV's on all the time. And even when they go to school, there are very few moments of silence. And so if I just look at us as humanity being raised by our senses, not necessarily by our inner spiritual voice, I don't see very often that anybody knows what outer peace is, let alone inner peace. And so I'm going to invite you as we share, and yes, words are coming out of my mouth, but it's a sharing. I hear you, I feel you. I'm going to invite you to look for times and moments in your life when you have experienced deep and profound peace. And anytime, today, tomorrow, that you can give yourself that kind of quiet that is undisturbable. Where the phone is off. Maybe you hear the sounds of birds, but technology is still, and there's no one talking to you. And you're not talking to yourself. You're just quiet. So I'm going to say about my life. My life, in spite of what you might project onto me, is actually mostly quiet. And when you perhaps watch me moving around here, you might notice that I don't really talk very much, or to very many. That's because I'm called to be quiet inside and listen to what I call the voice within, but you could say, listen for any guidance that I hear, which might be go and give Evelyn a hug, which I usually do, or maybe you need to share this with Diana, I did today. Or maybe it's just sit and be still. But mostly, this person who seems so extroverted and so talkative when I'm talking, like in the workshop that I'm going to do next, I'm quiet. You probably don't know that Robert and I don't talk very much. If we talk, it's often on the way down here when we're both in the car. And what are we talking about? We're talking about how to serve God. Talking about new awarenesses and new insights. Talking about picking up our grandchildren and have we looked at anything that we might need to serve them. They're going to be with us for a week starting this afternoon. And one we don't know very well. She's coming on a plane by herself from Portland, so that's a big deal. So we want to make sure that we make a safe container for her while she's with us. When I get up in the morning, when we get up, there is a gesture of love, often a kiss, or an I love you, or both. And then we spend easily the first 2 to 3 hours in silence, each doing our own work in our own way. When I take a shower, I'm actually cleansing my thinking. I'm not trying to think, I'm actually washing away my thoughts, my worries, my concerns, my scheduling, my stuff and things. I'm actually clearing myself. So when are you kind of caught up in all the stuff and things of the world? Well, as I'm getting ready to go off to work at one of my offices, and I don't know if you know this, but I see, I'll say between 50 and 60 people each week for counseling, often with some serious concerns that they have. And my work is to be at peace. So I'm getting myself all ready for that. And sometimes Robert will tell you that I rush because I use every little millisecond to actually be talking to people mostly either inner or outer and giving them what I would say is my peace. And so when I'm rushing, I jump in the car. I told him that this morning. And when I get in my little car, I have a little electric car, which is very quiet, by the way. When I get in my electric car, instantly I'm absolutely quiet again. Because when I arrive, for everyone that I see, I want to be quiet. I want to be still, not full of what I have to say. But quiet, receptive, present, listening. By the way, that's one of the things you do really well, Janie. I just happen to be looking at you. You're still a lot. Several of you are very quiet. You spend a lot of time very quiet. But often, I think it comes from a place that we began where there was a lot of silence. So I want you to begin to look at your own life and ask, where do you find inner silence? Where do you find outer silence? Where do you find a place where you can actually be and feel totally safe and at home with what we would call in unity talk, God within? Be at home with spirit within. Be at home with love within. Be at home in a place where there are no worries, no fears, no angers, no tears. You're just at home. And then I'm going to invite you to stop and look at, so when something intrudes on your peace, how do you return home again? What do you do? A bill comes, somebody knocks at the door, somebody's upset that comes into your presence. What do you do? Maybe you start being irritated. Maybe you get triggered in some way. And what do you do? Now, a fair number of the people who come to me come from a place of upset and anger and tears. And one of the simplest things that you can do is to step away from the situation. I don't know if you ever have irritated and irritation. Irritated and irritation. Bug somebody who's bugging you. Gotten mad back at someone who's angry with you. Been hurt by someone who you hurt back. If you've experienced that, do you keep on going? You keep on persisting with the upset, the resistance, the anger, the fear, keep poking at it, or do you step away? Do you change the channel? Do you change your mind? Do you distract yourself? It's often what I do with kids, and it works really well. Pattern interrupt, you know, there are a lot of fancy words and terms and techniques for all of this, but it really is just step away from the situation that's bugging you. Get a new perspective, or no perspective at all, because you're paying attention to something good and wonderful. So for me, a lot of that is stepping away. So sometimes with people, I'm inviting them to step away and look at their life from a different perspective. And what I would ask you to do is look at what they're sharing with you from a different perspective. So what did Jesus do? Here I am, I've just been crucified, hung on the cross, all that other stuff that happens theoretically to his body. And what did he do? He came back and he said, peace be with you. Sounds like ignoring it, doesn't it? Sounds like denying it. It sounds like showing up and saying, you know what, no harm here. Let's just move on. So why do we stay and keep bugging what's bugging us? Perhaps we have falsely been taught, just something to consider, that trying to figure out, analyze it, and fix it, correct it, is just going to create more of the same. Perhaps we've falsely been taught that when we criticize and blame or feel guilty and complain, it's just going to stay there. Perhaps what we need to do is step away and breathe. So what's a breath? You can try breathing. What is breath? You might notice that if you begin to breathe, even that big deep breath, your mind will not hang on to what it was holding on to intently. Just breathe. Create a little space. Stop trying to make what you thought was true be real and stay, and let it go. Let it go. And then I have my handy little what can I do bracelet, because now I've stepped away from the circumstance, and now I've taken a deep breath or 2 or 5 or however many, or lie down and belly breathe, or take a nap, or go and work in the garden, but I've taken my own step away and breath. And then you can ask, so what can I do? What can I do? Not what can't I do, but what can I do? Well, I can be happy. I can apologize. I can do what's fun. I can let it go and trust that it's working out fine. I can choose peace. I can choose peace. So stop and ask. That's what I asked in the beginning. Stop and ask, what do you do? What do you do to find peace again within you? To refine or define what peace is for you. Talked about silence. For me, I know very well. I mean, I spent, probably 10 years back in the 80s with no technology, no TV, no radio, no news. I purposely listened to no music that had lyrics, or that had lyrics that I was going to think when I heard the song. On purpose, because I wanted to have space, emptiness, openness, peace. And I'm inviting you to look again for that too. So I said earlier that I've been learning that peace brings miracles. What that taught me, or what my clients teach me, was they're the ones that come to me and ask for help. And by the way, when someone asks me for help, I never do it in front of other people. I do it behind a closed door in a quiet, confidential setting with no interruption. And so you may notice that I actually don't answer a lot of your questions or concerns. I'm just out here roaming around, but I'm totally available to answer them in private. I want to respect that inner knowing place in all of us. It's far more important than anything of this world, than anything of this world. And so, I lost my train of thought right there because I went there. And so what I would suggest is that when you find that peace within you, that what you do is you claim it as your special place. Even now, as you're sitting there, if you would take time, eyes open or closed, it doesn't matter. Robert did it in his meditation to some degree. You can close your eyes and you can say, I want peace. And look for a place within. Perhaps it's in your imagination, like that beautiful song, Imagine. Perhaps it's an open meadow, or lying on your back looking at the clouds. Or perhaps it's in a deep breath, or a place of faith, or remembering your grandma. I want you to find that place and claim it yours. Claim it yours. Because it is yours, and it is for you. It's a gift you have given yourself, and you must honor and treat it with love. Peace is within you. It is your natural state. And when we go there, miracles of love happen. Bodies are healed. Apparent wrongs are forgiven. And love is remembered. Your place of peace is with you wherever you go. Whatever you do. St. Francis, someone was reminding me that this is his 5-year meditation, 5 years of study. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. And where there's injury, pardon. And where there's doubt, faith. And where there's despair, hope. And where there's darkness, light. And where there's sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, be understood as to understand, and to be loved as to love. That's love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born again to eternal life. Peace be with us all.